Hello, my name is David Riggins and I'm a training specialist with Infowise Solutions. Today I'm going to build a solution in Office 365 SharePoint that imports data from a Microsoft Azure SQL Server database to a SharePoint list using the Infowise tool called Smart Import Pro. There are a lot of ways to import data from outside sources into SharePoint, such as SharePoint Designer database connections, custom .NET code, or SQL Server integration services, among many others. I've used all those methods and many more, and I can safely say that in my experience, Infowise's Smart Import Pro is one of the simplest and easiest ways to import data into your SharePoint list. It's one page of configurations and you're connected and importing. Smart Import Pro allows you to connect to Microsoft Exchange, web services, and most databases. In the training notes, I will link to a training video my colleague gives on importing emails from Exchange. It's really fantastic if you want to create systems that have email-based approvals and much more. Today, though, we're going to focus on importing from Microsoft's cloud database on Azure. Today, we're going to do some work for a property management company that owns several software tools. The core platform is Office 365 and SharePoint, but they also subscribe to an external payment processor that collects rent online and through mobile devices. This payment processing company exposes a Microsoft Azure database so we can access the data on rental payments. We're going to use Smart Import Pro to import the rental payment data into our internal SharePoint environment so we can manage the tenants with our other SharePoint tools. From this point forward, I will be building the solution and testing. At times my pace might be a little fast if you are following along. Feel free to pause and rewind the video for more details. In this window you can see the basic database setup in Azure. Two important screens we need for Infowise are the connection strings, which you can see here on this page, and the firewall settings, which you can see on this page. Azure requires you to enter the IP addresses of the servers that will connect to your Azure database. In order for Infowise to import data from Azure, we need to enter the Infowise IP addresses into Azure, which you can see here. I will link the specific IP addresses in the training notes. This is SQL Server Management Studio connected to the payment processor's Azure database. Here you can see the properties table we're going to work with today. There are 4 fields. Property ID. This is the primary key for the table and the main ID we're going to use to identify each property. Last updated. This is a date-time column that updates every time a record is changed. Address. The address of the property. And rent paid. Simple yes/no field that says if the rent has been paid this month or not. This is our Property Management Office 365 SharePoint site. The first thing we're going to do is add a simple list called Rent Collection Tracker. Now I'm going to make modifications to the list so that it matches our Azure database. I'm going to change title to address. I'm going to add a new field called Property ID as a number. And this is going to match our primary key of the database. I'm going to add a new field called Last Updated, which is a date-time column. And I'm going to add a yes/no field called Rent Paid. One extra thing I'm going to do is go back into Property ID and enforce unique, and that will ensure that we don't import more than one record. Now it's time for me to access the Infowise Designer so that I can build a Smart Import profile. I'm going to go to List Settings and Design for Infowise Ultimate Forms. I'm going to scroll down to the Import section, and in General Settings I'm going to put in Azure import. I'm going to do an hourly frequency of 15 minutes. For an additional fee, you can contact sales at Infowise and get a high frequency polling. I find this is useful for email polling and stuff like that, but for our purposes, a frequency of 15 minutes is going to work just fine. Under data provider settings, I'm going to choose Database Web Service and Microsoft SQL Server. Now I'm going to input the connection string that we got from the Azure Database settings. I'm going to click the connect button and I get back a connection to my Azure table properties. And you'll see property ID, but we're going to change that to last updated for our date column. Now I'm going to add my action, sync list item document. There are two other types of actions that you can use, but for our purposes we're going to sync the list and the item every time. Now if you wanted to split these actions up, say in a create, you only wanted to import certain action or certain items in a create, but you wanted to update only certain other items. For example, in an update I only want to update properties that are in Washington State, but for my import I want to import all of the properties. That if you can split them up like that, that'll give you more power over what you're trying to do. But for our purposes we're just going to do a sync, which is going to do a create and an update with the same properties, same values, same conditions. So now I'm going to go ahead and set my SharePoint values and match them up to my Azure values. So I'm going to match address to address. I'm going to add that in. I'm going to match last updated to last updated. I'm going to add in property ID connected to property ID, and I'm going to add in rent paid and connect it to rent paid. And this is a one-for-one match to our Azure database. So for item, what we want to do is match up our primary keys between our SharePoint list and our Azure database. And this is easy. It's just going to be property ID equals property ID. And this is what the code uses to match what is the right record that I need to update or confirm that already exists. And in conditions, we could set up in this piece here to say only import a certain type of data, like from a specific state or from a specific amount or something like that, and only bring those in and only update those records. But for our purposes, we're just going to leave it generic. We're going to add that action and then add the profile. So this is the action down here in action settings, and up here this is the profile. So we need to do both. We need to add the action and add the profile. And we'll see it right here. You can see by clicking on the import history link that we have successfully executed an importing after 15 minutes. And you can see that it has imported these 5 items. Going over to the list, we see those 5 items in our list that have been imported, and we see that some people have not paid rent. In our side-by-side comparison, you can also see that our records, our 5 records in SharePoint, match our 5 records in SQL Server. Okay, the property management company has chased down their 3 delinquent renters, and through their third-party application, the rent has been paid. And as you can see here, we have 3 updated records with rent paid with 3 updated timestamps. Now we click on the import history and we see that it has successfully run again in the 15-minute polling window, and it has synced 3 items. If we go over to our rent collection tracker, we also see that those 3 items are now marked as rent paid yes. As you can see, Smart Import Pro provides a quick and easy integration with databases. In future videos, I will be covering more advanced topics using the Infowise tools. I hope you found this training session useful, and if you have any questions, you can email me at davidr@infowisesolutions.com, or you can reply to this video post or contact Infowise directly for more information.